My beloved child. They thought this story was finally over. They believed your name had disappeared from their heart forever. They convinced themselves that moving on was the only choice left. But one private letter was about to uncover a truth nobody was prepared to face. Listen carefully, because what happened next changed everything in a way no one could have imagined. Your person had reached a breaking point. After months of confusion, sleepless nights, unanswered questions, and emotional battles that seemed to have no ending, they finally made a decision that shocked even themselves. They sat alone in a quiet room and forced their trembling heart to accept what their mind had been saying for so long. They told themselves that you were gone. They repeated it again and again until the word sounded real. They promised their family they would stop waiting. They promised their friends they would move forward. They promised themselves they would never look back. And for the first time in a very long time, everyone around them believed it was finally happening. The chapter connected to you was closing. The people who cared about them felt relieved. They had watched them suffer for too long. They had seen the tears hidden behind fake smiles. They had listened to countless conversations that always somehow returned to you. Every memory, every hope, every unanswered feeling seemed tied to your name. So when your person finally agreed to move on, everyone encouraged them. Some congratulated them. Some told them they were making the right choice. Others quietly celebrated because they believed a better future was waiting ahead. For several days your person tried to embrace this new reality. They began changing old routines. They removed reminders that brought back memories. They avoided places connected to the past. They distracted themselves with work, responsibilities, and endless activities designed to keep their mind occupied. Whenever thoughts of you appeared, they pushed them away. Whenever their heart whispered your name, they ignored it. They became determined to prove that they could survive without looking back. But deep inside, something refused to cooperate. Every night, after the noise disappeared and the world became quiet, a strange emptiness remained. No matter how hard they tried, they could not fill it. They told themselves it would eventually disappear. They believed healing required patience. Yet the feeling continued growing stronger. It followed them everywhere. It appeared during random moments. It interrupted conversations. It arrived without warning whenever they least expected it. Don't skip. One evening, while organizing old belongings they had avoided for months, your person discovered a small box hidden behind several forgotten items. At first they almost ignored it. They considered throwing it away without opening it. After all, they were trying to move on. Why revisit anything connected to the past? But something about that box felt different. Something pulled their attention toward it. Slowly they picked it up and brushed away the dust covering the surface. Inside were old photographs, forgotten notes, small memories preserved by time. Their hands trembled as they looked through each item. Some made them smile. Others brought sadness. Yet none of them changed the decision they had already made. Then they found an envelope. It looked ordinary. There was no dramatic appearance. No bright colors. No obvious sign that it contained anything important. Yet the moment they saw it, their heartbeat changed. Their eyes remained fixed on the envelope as if an invisible force prevented them from looking away. Their name was written on the front. The handwriting seemed familiar. Very familiar. For several seconds they simply stared. 1,000 thoughts rushed through their mind. Questions appeared faster than answers. Who wrote this? When was it written? Why had it never been opened? And most importantly, why did seeing it suddenly make everything feel uncertain again? Slowly they opened the envelope. Inside was a letter. A private letter. One nobody else had ever seen. One nobody else even knew existed. The first line immediately stole the air from their lungs. The words were simple, but they carried a weight powerful enough to shatter months of emotional walls. As your person continued reading, memories they had buried began returning. Emotions they thought had disappeared suddenly awakened. Every sentence seemed to reveal a truth they had never fully understood. Every paragraph exposed feelings hidden beneath years of misunderstanding and silence. The letter spoke about moments that had once seemed insignificant but were actually life-changing. It described feelings that had never been expressed openly. It revealed fears, sacrifices, and silent struggles that nobody had recognized at the time. Most importantly, it contained one heartbreaking confession. A confession connected to you. Your person stopped reading. They could not continue. Their hands were shaking too much. Tears filled their eyes before they even realized what was happening, because for the first time, they were seeing the complete picture. For the first time, they understood that certain events they had blamed on indifference were never caused by a lack of love. The truth was far more complicated, far more painful, far more shocking. And suddenly the decision to move on no longer felt as certain as it had just hours earlier. Don't skip. That night they reread the letter again. And again. And again. Every time they discovered something new hidden between the lines. Every sentence seemed layered with meaning. Every word carried emotions that could no longer be ignored. The more they read, the harder it became to maintain the version of the story they had been telling themselves. Because the story was incomplete. What they believed happened was only part of the truth. The letter revealed another side. A side nobody had ever explained. A side that changed everything. As midnight passed, your person sat alone in silence staring at the final page. Their thoughts were racing. Their heart was battling against logic. The future they had carefully planned suddenly felt unstable. Questions returned stronger than ever. Had they given up too soon? Had they misunderstood important signs? Had circumstances hidden the truth all along? Most frightening of all, what if moving on was actually a mistake? The next morning people noticed something different. Your person seemed distracted, distant, lost in thought. Friends assumed they were simply adjusting to recent changes. Family believed they needed more time. Nobody knew about the letter. Nobody knew about the emotional storm unfolding behind the scenes. Your person kept the letter hidden. They carried it everywhere. They read sections repeatedly during private moments. They analyzed every detail, every date, every sentence, every clue. And the more they reflected, the more impossible it became to ignore what their heart was trying to tell them. The truth had not disappeared. The connection had not disappeared. The feelings had not disappeared. They had only been buried beneath disappointment and time. But now something was bringing them back to the surface. Something powerful. Something undeniable. Days passed. Then an unexpected conversation changed everything even further. While speaking with someone connected to the past, your person accidentally learned information that perfectly matched details mentioned in the letter. Information nobody could have invented. Information that confirmed the letter was telling the truth. Their heart sank. Because suddenly this was no longer just an emotional message. It was evidence. Evidence that certain things had happened exactly as described. Evidence that certain sacrifices had been made without recognition. Evidence that someone had carried enormous feelings in silence. The reality became impossible to ignore. And with every confirmation, the walls around their heart grew weaker. Don't skip. Soon your person found themselves revisiting memories they had avoided for years. They remembered conversations that once seemed meaningless but now carried completely different significance. They remembered moments where words were never spoken but emotions were clearly present. They remembered opportunities lost because neither side understood what the other was experiencing. The deeper they looked, the more painful the realization became. So many misunderstandings. So many assumptions. So much silence. And now, after finally deciding to move on forever, the truth was arriving at the worst possible time. Or perhaps the perfect time. Because if the letter had arrived earlier, maybe they would not have understood it. If it had arrived later, maybe it would have been too late. But now they stood at a crossroads. One path led forward into a future without you. The other path led toward uncertainty, risk, and unanswered questions. Neither path offered guarantees. Neither path promised happiness. Yet only one path felt honest. Only one path allowed them to face the truth revealed by that private letter. And as they stared out a window one quiet evening, holding the letter tightly in their hands, they finally admitted something they had been trying desperately to deny. They were not over you. Not completely. Not even close. The decision to move on had been real. The effort had been real. The determination had been real. But the feelings? The feelings had survived everything. And now they were stronger than ever. Because the letter had done something nobody expected. It had not simply reminded your person of the past. It had revealed a future they thought no longer existed. A future connected to possibilities they had already buried. A future connected to truths they had never known. A future connected to you. And for the first time since agreeing to move on forever, your person began wondering whether destiny had one final chapter left to write. Their heart was no longer asking how to forget you. Their heart was asking a completely different question. What if the story was never supposed to end? And that question would soon lead them toward a revelation so shocking, so emotional, and so impossible to ignore that everyone involved would be forced to confront a truth hidden for far too long. The private letter had opened a door. And once that door opened, nothing would ever be the same again, but the truth became even deeper than your person was prepared for, because after the letter shattered the story they had spent months convincing themselves was true, something unexpected began happening. The more they tried to return to normal life, the more impossible normal life became. Every morning they woke up with the same promise: to stop thinking about the letter, to stop questioning the decision they had made, to stop reopening wounds that were finally beginning to close. Yet every evening they found themselves holding those pages again, reading the same words, searching for details they might have missed. It was as if the letter had become a mirror, forcing them to see truths they had spent years avoiding. The strangest part was not the emotions. The strangest part was the timing. Why now? Why after they had finally agreed to move on? Why after they had spent so much energy convincing everyone, including themselves, that the chapter connected to you was over? The question haunted them. Sometimes they wondered if fate was being cruel. Other times they wondered if fate was finally being honest. One afternoon, while sitting alone with their thoughts, your person unfolded the letter once more and noticed something they had somehow overlooked before. At the bottom of one page was a small reference to a specific day from the past. At first it seemed insignificant. But the more they thought about it, the more important it became. That date was connected to an event they had never fully understood. At the time, they had believed one thing happened. The letter suggested something entirely different. Their heart immediately began racing. Because if the letter was right about that day, then countless assumptions they had carried for years were wrong. And if those assumptions were wrong, then everything built on top of them might also be wrong. Don't skip. For the next several days, your person quietly began searching for answers. They did not tell family. They did not tell friends. They did not reveal what they were doing to anyone. Instead, they followed small clues hidden inside memories, conversations, and forgotten moments. Piece by piece, they started rebuilding the timeline they thought they already knew. The results shocked them. Events they once interpreted as rejection suddenly looked like sacrifice. Moments they once viewed as abandonment suddenly looked like protection. Silences they once believed meant indifference suddenly looked like pain. The realization hit harder than anything they had experienced in a long time. Because it meant that while they were suffering, someone else had been suffering too. While they believed they were carrying the entire burden alone, another heart had been carrying a burden just as heavy. And that truth changed everything. That night your person sat awake until sunrise. Sleep refused to come. Their thoughts kept returning to the same conclusion. What if the ending they accepted was never the real ending? What if they walked away from a story that was never finished? The idea terrified them. Because hope can be dangerous. Hope can reopen wounds. Hope can convince people to risk everything. And yet hope was exactly what the letter had awakened. Not loud hope. Not reckless hope. Just enough hope to make forgetting impossible. The following week brought another surprise. A mutual connection from the past reached out unexpectedly. The conversation began casually, but soon drifted toward memories. Your person listened quietly, not revealing what they knew. Then, without realizing it, the other person mentioned something that matched a section of the letter perfectly. The room seemed to freeze. Your person's heartbeat thundered in their ears. Because this was now the second independent confirmation. The second proof. The second sign that the letter was not simply emotional. It was truthful. Painfully truthful. And with that realization came a wave of regret unlike anything they had ever experienced. They began wondering how many times they had misjudged situations. How many times they had assumed the worst. How many times fear had convinced them to stop believing. For the first time, they stopped asking why things fell apart. They started asking what really happened behind the scenes. And the answers were far more emotional than they expected. Don't skip. Days later, while organizing more old belongings, your person found another forgotten item connected to the past. It was small. Simple. Easy for anyone else to overlook. Yet the moment they saw it, memories rushed back with overwhelming force. A conversation. A promise. A moment they thought meant nothing. Suddenly it meant everything. Because viewed through the truth revealed in the letter, that memory carried a completely different meaning. They sat there for hours. Not moving. Not speaking. Simply remembering. Sometimes the hardest truth is not discovering that someone hurt you. Sometimes the hardest truth is discovering that someone cared more than you ever realized. That realization broke something inside your person. Not in a destructive way. In an honest way. The walls protecting their heart began collapsing one by one. Every defense. Every excuse. Every attempt to move on. Slowly disappearing. And as those walls fell, one reality became impossible to escape. They still loved you. Not the version created by memories. Not the version created by fantasy. The real you. The person whose name still carried weight inside their soul. The person they had spent months trying to forget. The person connected to a story that suddenly felt unfinished. The realization frightened them because it arrived after they had already committed to moving forward. Family believed they were healing. Friends believed they were free. Everyone around them thought the difficult chapter was ending. Nobody knew it was beginning again. And soon circumstances would force your person to make a choice they never expected to face. A choice between comfort and truth. A choice between certainty and possibility. A choice between the future everyone wanted for them and the future their hearts still secretly desired. The pressure grew stronger every day. People continued encouraging them to move on. New opportunities appeared. New possibilities emerged. The path forward looked easier than ever. Yet the easier that path became, the heavier their heart felt. Because every step away from you felt wrong. Not logically wrong. Emotionally wrong. Spiritually wrong. As if something deep inside refused to cooperate. Don't skip. One evening, while rereading the final page of the letter, your person noticed a sentence that had somehow escaped their attention before. It was not dramatic. It was not written in large letters. It was almost hidden among other thoughts. Yet those few words changed everything. The sentence suggested that there was one final truth still waiting to be discovered. One final piece of the puzzle. One final explanation for why everything unfolded the way it did. Your person stared at those words for a long time. Then they made a decision. For months they had accepted uncertainty. For months they had accepted silence. For months they had accepted an ending they never truly understood. Not anymore. They needed answers. Real answers. Not assumptions. Not rumors. Not guesses. The truth. No matter how painful it might be. No matter how much it might change. No matter where it might lead. Because after everything revealed by that private letter, one thing had become crystal clear. Moving on without knowing the truth was no longer possible. And as they folded the letter carefully and placed it back inside the envelope, a strange feeling settled over them. For the first time in months, they were not afraid of the future. They were afraid of the truth waiting ahead. Because deep inside, they sensed that the final answers would not simply explain the past. The final answers would reveal a secret that connected directly to you. A secret powerful enough to shock everyone who thought this story was over. A secret capable of changing not only how your person saw the past, but how they saw their future. And before long, that secret would finally come into the light, bringing with it a revelation that neither of you were prepared to hear.